at ya. Back at ya. Tell you what's master. Coming at ya. Coming at ya. Rhyme style disaster. Coming at ya. Back at ya. Tell you what's master.
All right, welcome to another scintillating episode of Cut the Bull with our multi-host panel. We've got Charles Love, Brooks Crenshaw, Christy Kelly, easily the best of the bunch. And today we are interviewing Katherine Brodsky, a journalist and really across the spectrum writer. Glad to have you on the show. And
thanks for having me.
The first question I have, obviously, you wrote a book. I think we were initially contacted actually by your PR team, which felt very classy and sophisticated. And the book they kind of pitched to us was, I believe, No Apologies, How to Find and Free Your Voice in the Age of Outrage. Is that the most recent book?
That is the most recent book. It's also the only book so far, so I guess it will have to be the most recent.
Yes, one more book than most people have written for any haters that want to pop up in the comments with their Roman statue asses. So, okay.
There you go. Listen, I'm proud of finishing a book. It's a book, you know. I wrote it. I finished it. I got it published. That is an accomplishment, you know.
That's more than many people who claim to have a book under their titles can say. Many of them did not write their book.
Well, that's right. That's actually true for athletes and so on. But I mean, that probably 1% of living people have written a book. I actually am always annoyed by hating in general. Like, man, the WNBA fucking sucks. Like, dude, you averaged 2 points in high school. Let's calm it down. Let's move it along. But what would you tell us about No Apologies as a work? What is the book about?
Sure. Well, the book, I started working on it in 2021, although it had come out a little bit more, a lot more recently than that. So books take a while. But it was based on what I was seeing in the culture, and specifically sort of the intolerance towards divergent speech, the tendency to silence people, the creep of censorship. So the book basically tells the stories of different people who had spoken out on different subject matters, whether that was science. Some people haven't. Some people, some people had maybe more controversial opinions. Other people, I wouldn't say that would be the case. But basically they were silenced by people, by institutions, lost their jobs, or maybe the mob came after them. And so I wanted to put down their stories, and it's anything from, somebody was canceled in a knitting circle. So who would have thought that knitting would be this aggressive? But, for defending another person, some people were silenced in terms of their disagreement, maybe with science, medical things, because, during the height of the pandemic, things they might have said, or wanting to bring in speakers. There was a professor, and some of the people I interviewed for the book also just, are artists, and talk about the importance of free speech and discourse and art, and how important it is to have an environment where people can express and play, and sometimes, maybe say things that might sound inappropriate, but which is part of the creative process. So things like that. And of course, when I was writing it, it was at the height of all of that. I think things have come down a little bit, but not fully. And something that at the time I was seeing this more on the left. A lot of the people that I've included in the book were people who were also on the left, who had these situations. I also found myself in one of these situations. And now I'm kind of seeing it from all sides, because to me, I look at it as a human problem, not necessarily just an ideological problem, because people can have different ideologies and treat each other with respect and be able to have discourse and not have that tendency to silence. But some people will always have that tendency to silence, which is quite an authoritarian thing.
Yeah. And so 2 comments, one very brief. I'm actually not surprised there's a lot of drama in the knitting circle. One by Twitter, I'm not going to give her a real name, but it goes by Buffalo Sponks. and is a well-known yarn artist. And apparently it's mostly like very high IQ, upper middle class women, mostly left wing, and they're vicious with one another. Like your yarn is shit. Like I've read their comments to each other, the political
Wow.
stuff, it's unbelievable.
Are there drive-bys? That'd be cool.
No, but if we're mostly male group, there'd be a lot of fights. Like people criticize each other's sexuality and let's say hygiene. Like it's weird. Um, but Christy looks a little interested in the yarn drama actually, but we're it's an
There was
interesting
also
world.
a young adult. There was also like a young adult writer. And there was a lot of drama inside of that world as well. Kat Rosenfeld.
Oh yeah,
So
okay.
and she covered that. Yeah. So she was one of the people in the book. Brett Weinstein is in the book, and that was more of the, obviously that would be more the science side of things and the disagreements. And I would say like I don't necessarily agree with everybody in the book. There's also environmental. It's just that I think very strongly that it is important for people to be able to come in good faith and approach difficult subjects, and for us to have that back and forth with that, to challenge our ideas, to test our ideas, and people can be wrong. I think there's this like tendency to think people should be right, should get everything right. No, no, sometimes you say the wrong thing. Sometimes you're wrong about something. But that is also how you get corrected, and that's how you learn. And I think that's something that's sort of often missing from the discourse, which has become so Puritan that you can never misstep. But, I have conversations with people all the time where I might say the wrong thing, or maybe I'm not as informed about a topic as they are, or maybe I just got something wrong, or I didn't hear a really good um, debunking or a good counter. And I end up learning from that and sometimes changing my views. And if you are too afraid to say the wrong thing, you never get to hear these ideas that might counter yours, that might cause you to change your mind.
Yeah. So I had one follow-up question, but since I spent a couple minutes on yarn, let's pop it to the panel for one, your questions for Catherine, but also like Charles Love, I think you're one of the most nuanced among us, a sage and a scholar. Do you think cancel culture is worse on the left or the right? Her book 2020 2021 focuses on the left, but we're seeing this on all sides now. And following that, what's your question for the guest?
Well, I don't really understand. I mean, I'd have to ask her. She said she started writing this in 21. I don't even understand why, because clearly no one was canceled until Jimmy Kimmel. So I don't know what she would be writing about. I mean, seriously, just making some stuff up. Um, I don't know. I agree with her that it's not a left or right thing per se. See, it's interesting. I like that you say I'm more nuanced. The issue is that a lot of these reactions to things are human. So she's right that they're not so much left or right. What becomes left or right is the extent to which it happens, right? And how it's able to manifest itself. So I would say, to answer your question before I ask her a question, that it's more on the left, but it's not because the right wouldn't be inclined to do it. The right tends to, lately I just realized that just popped in my head. I'm honest, it's cut the bull, but then I'm like, I should stop dunking on people. But what are you going to do? I'm already down the road. The right seems to be not that really good at a lot of the things that the left's tactics are. So even when they want to do it, they're not as good. So it doesn't make them better and more moral, but they're not as good at it and they're not as organized, right? So when the left wants to cancel someone, right? Maybe if you talk about, so they're similar from like, we're going to boycott something. They both can do that. Like, we're going to boycott, but they can't both shut you out of an industry because they don't run the fashion industry and the fabric industry and have, 70% of the CEOs in all the schools. So they don't have enough control to do it. So because I agree that they both are inclined to do it, there's definitely a really clear, um, I guess strength on the left to be able to really, if they really want to cancel you and get rid of you, they can push you out of societal norms. And, they tend to be, in areas or in circles where, people talk up about it more, so that makes it easier to really they follow issues that pull at the heartstrings, so they're able to label you where you don't like immigrants, you don't like the homeless, you don't like blacks, where when the right gets upset, they can't really use the same, guilt trip. So that's the difference there. Um, I guess if I were to ask a question, um, you know, it would be I guess similar to that, you said it was a human thing, but do you think that what I said makes sense about how they're able to implement their canceling versus one side versus the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a few things that I think are going on. So, and including power mechanisms, which you touched on. So, um, the right at certain points had more power. So, for example, you had the Red Scare during Hollywood time, during the McCarthy era, where they did have all this control over culture. And, a lot of people's lives were actually destroyed because they were, accused of being communists and so on. There were times where the right had that power. Right now, I would say clearly the left has much more institutional and cultural power. And therefore, the levers of control, they have more of them. So they have more impact. So, for example, if the right wanted to cancel me specifically, there's probably not very much they could do. Like maybe I'd get a little bit mobbed, people will send me some death threats, whatever, but they can't really hurt me in terms of my career or things like that. The left very much can, especially because, I work in media, I work in film, entertainment, so that there is much more of an impact. So it's not necessarily the lack of desire, it's the lack of power. And also, I think there is a level of, I think victimhood also plays a role here. So what I'm kind of seeing psychologically is that a lot of times, like for example, people on the left see themselves as some people. I'm always generalizing, so just to keep in mind. But um, there's a lot of groups on the left where they view themselves as victims, and in some ways, there are some areas where it's true, maybe some areas where it's a perception. Doesn't matter. That's how they perceive. And now they have power. Well, with that power, A, revenge, and B, uh, you know, they view it is important to use that power to control and shape things in the way that they want, in the way that they feel is right and best for the world. And I'm seeing the same kind of grievance culture on the right, where they feel oppressed by the left. Again, some of it is valid and some of it is a little bit over the top, but that's their perception. So now there is this sense of, well, because they've gained political power, certainly, in the US and other parts of the world as well. Well, that power can be used in the similar way as a tool to A, take away power from their opponents and to silence the things that they strongly feel is, things that they disagree with. And to kind of control and shape and hone. Um, whether that's books or, well, the Jimmy Kimmel thing. I mean, I think I do have pretty strong feelings about the Jimmy Kimmel thing, where the main issue of that being that the FCC was involved in that, because people can have their reactions and whatever they are, but once you use a tool,
How was the FCC involved?
the FCC was involved in the head of the FCC went on and basically said that we can do it the easy way or the hard way. He pressured the affiliates and the companies to take that show off the air, as well as there was a deal between the parent company and another company. I now don't remember the exact names of the
Sinclair.
companies. Sinclair, yeah, and second company where they're doing a merger and they need FCC approval. So there was also that pressure. So it is using a tool of the government to pressure. And I think that's where it crosses quite a massive line.
Fair enough. So I actually have some comments on that, but I want to get to the panel here. I mean, the one thing I would note about Jimmy Kimmel is that he had less viewers in the desired demographic than either of us on Twitter, I think. It was 129,000 people. I mean, like late night is a dying
Well, that's
industry.
just to be
That's a
fair, like
demo.
it's a specific, yeah, it's the
18
demo
to
audience.
24.
Yeah, so I think it's like
No, that's exactly correct.
2.3 or
Without
2.5.
exaggeration, it was 129,300 in the demo audience that watched for more than 2 minutes. But I mean, still, like when you compare that to, say, Greg Gutfeld, who's on a cable station that really has only risen the past 10 years, I don't think that broadcast TV, where you're working out a frequency deal with the government, this is just a sideline thing for me, but you're working out a frequency deal with the government, you've got sound men running around, you've got, 86 employees. I don't think that's going to work. This is me staging the scene.
No,
for-
I was just
10,000 views
talking
or
about
something.
about this recently as well. Well, one thing is with Gutfeld, of course, like he's the only guy, kind of on the right or libertarian, I guess, who's doing this, right? So he's going to get all the audience on that side because there's not much variety. However, what you're saying is, I mean, there's so many podcasts that have massive audiences, and the cost of doing that is just so significantly less than some like a Kimmel show, which by comparison, you know, the production values and the teams that they have to have and the studio space and all of that, is just, you know, the cost of that is too great, which is probably going to cause a shift. I mean, it's already happening. We're seeing more changes there. I don't know if we're going to have shows like that for the long haul.
Okay, it looks like both Christy and Brooks want to comment. I'm really interested in what Brooks has to say about McCarthyism, but Christy, ladies first, like what's going on?
Well, I guess I asked the question about the FCC, not because I didn't know, but because I just wanted to know, like, your point of view. Um,
What do you
the
think?
FC, Harvard, when they disagreed with the Trump administration, they took them to court. So the FCC does not automatically bend to the will of Trump. You know, they definitely could stand up, you know, against him. Also, not only that, but the company Disney themselves, right? They could have stood up just like Harvard stood up. They're a private organization. They acted within their best interest, their bottom line. There are still affiliates that have not put Kimmel back on the air. So I definitely see a difference between it not being a government actor, it being private. And also, this is not cancel culture, but it's what the right is dubbing accountability culture. And we can definitely talk more about that later. But I do see it as a difference. And I see it as a private actor. I mean, it was a bit disgusting, actually, what he said. And so he faced the accountability of it.
Yeah,
Chris,
so
really
Yeah, go
interesting
ahead.
point, because I wanted to get your position on this as a social commentator, but also as an attorney. Like what you just said, I don't mean any offense, but sounds a lot like what people on the left used to say, right? Like, look, this isn't cancel culture, buddy. This is consequence culture. You Nazi bastards can't go out there and just say women shouldn't be able to vote. That's not acceptable. I mean, so do you think we're doing, because we're all on the right mostly, do you think we're doing a different and more honorable version of this?
I think it's a slippery slope, honestly, but I also will check my bias, right? So I'm probably not the most objective person. I mean, how often do you hear people admit, you know, their bias? I mean, I don't think that I would want to be, we talked about this before on the show. I don't think that I want to be involved, whether it's with business or a doctor or a teacher or even a late night, you know, host with somebody that would mock in any form somebody's death like they did Charlie Kirk's. So again, I am very biased when it comes to this issue, but I do see it as accountability. I see this as a private actor. I think the FCC, you know, is a straw man that the left is mostly using.
Well, I would argue that the FCC, in particular in this instance, the head of the FCC, I mean, he went on Benny Johnson's show. He had a political bias, the way he spoke. In terms of what was actually said on the Kimmel show, he didn't make fun or light of the deaf. In fact, he said quite a few things that were about, how terrible it is, that he condemned the way that people responded, the issue that people had with the comment, and Kimmel says it's not how he intended, so it depends on your interpretation. But he said basically that over the weekend, MAGA spend, pointing the finger at anybody by themselves, right? Which is what was kind of going on, because everybody was like, both sides of things. They were all kind of like trying to blame each other. And obviously, like the actual shooter was, now that we have all the information, he certainly wasn't MAGA, but that he didn't make fun of the deaf. He made fun of the culture and the reaction on the right to what was happening. However, like going back to the FCC, that involvement, that pressure, I think is significant. And Disney, which is the private actor in this, they did end up bringing the show, which they had a lot of pressure as well, because there were all these people canceling their subscriptions in protest. And then the affiliates, which is really the ones that I think were most affected by it, especially like by what was going on with the FCC with the potential merger, they still haven't brought the show back, and probably, well, I don't know whether they will or won't. So I do think there was government involvement there. And I think with like Trump also being the president and saying, let's cancel these hosts are next and they're terrible. I personally think that is such an overstep for anybody in such a role in a government to go after individuals, whether they're reporters or media, personalities. Those kinds of things I take an issue with.
You quietly kill your enemies when you're in a position of power, like they know how to do in Europe and Latin America. None of this Trump bullshit. You go online. I'm actually not joking at all, but I mean, I'm smiling. But like, none of this BS where you go online and you say things like Rosie O'Donnell should be totally deplatformed. But anyway, enough for me. Brooks Crenshaw.
But that's kind of funny, because there was a comedian that I saw do a bit, and it was pretty funny, because he's like, well, the left kind of does it in shadowy, underhanded kind of ways, and the right just really sucks at this, because they just go, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna destroy you, like it's just so blatant. And I don't know, I mean, in a way it's like, well, at least you know where it's coming from.
Well, there's an element like the right constantly complains about the left being quote unquote feminized, but there are plenty of problems with male communication style as well, like stereotypically. Like I remember when Trump and Elon Musk and like Zelensky and Vance, I think this was one day we're all screaming at each other, and it's sort of like you guys could really have had that meeting before you turned the cameras on. Like motherfuck each other for an hour and then come out doing the buddy hug and yeah, nodding. But anyway, Brooks Crenshaw, you were really reacting when the McCarthyism thing came up. I mean, how do you feel about right versus left censorship? I mean, I think you're probably going to say a more eloquent version of what I was going to say, like the people McCarthy went after were communists. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think McCarthy gets a bad rap. I certainly think that whenever a movement like that occurs, there's going to be collateral, and that's the problem. But McCarthy was painted, and he's been vindicated largely by the Venona papers that were declassified in the 90s, that there was a lot more communist entrenchment, and that he was correct about that. So I tend to wince a little bit whenever the term McCarthyism hey, lies my liberal teacher told me, by the great Dr. Wilfred Reilly. Has a whole chapter on that. But yeah. So yeah, I tend to wince when I hear McCarthyism. Not that it wasn't without collateral. On the Kimmel piece, yeah, he was the lowest ratings in his time slot, like a third of Gutfeld's. So that's one thing. So from a business perspective, I could understand where is it worth the squeeze? If Colbert was losing as much money as he was, I can't imagine what the Kimmel show is potentially losing. The FCC being involved, I'm with Katherine on that. I don't like that. That said, I'll give you one tit for tat, right? I'll give you a little incidental contact. Let's cut that out after this, right? That kind of thing. That's kind of how I take on it, because like to hear the left right now about Kimmel there's this comedian that's got a great bit on it, and he's like, these people talking on the left about Kimmel, like talking about censorship, is like that alcoholic that that's a menace, that like shit on your cake at the wedding, and he's been sober for a day, and he's like, you guys need to get your lives together. And like that's exactly what's going on there. And so to be lectured about free speech about Jimmy Kimmel is a little both frustrating and somewhat delicious at the same time. When you talked about, the 2020, 2021 timeframe, I noticed that people with whom I disagreed amicably were suddenly on my side of the line on the left, because they were true believers in free speech and the ballot box. And then suddenly, figures like Brett Weinstein, Jordan Peterson, who were nominally more left than me, are suddenly on my side of the line. I realized that the left had a bunch of power-hungry posers that had been preaching free speech and the ballot box until they got enough power. And that made me assume that there were those on the right. I see some right figures, and we see that now, right? James Lindsay's done some work with regard to, kind of parsing out who's who on the right with regard to using the same types of tactics and actually critical theory. And in a sense, trying to play Boromir, right? When the ring needs to be destroyed instead of grabbing the ring, and we can use it. This is a gift, right? I think that's the right dividing line on the right. We should move away from that. I don't like Trump's attacks. I never liked Trump's attacks. That's why I didn't vote for him in 2016. I didn't have to vote. I was in a red state. I was happy with the outcome. But about a year into his first term, I realized, wait a second, he's a reflection of us. Like, the electorates get what they deserve. This is what we vote for as an electorate. So like, I tend to think the electorate is sick and ill-informed and uninformed. And being upstream of that, there's a lot of work to be done in the universities and other educational institutions to maybe set that ship aright. But yeah, I don't see us doing better than Trump right now. With regard to the institutions that you mentioned, I mean, the Long March really is this is the culmination of the Long March through the institutions, and what is coming out of academia is largely ahead of what's coming in the main culture. All the trans stuff, all the genderqueer stuff was happening 10, 20 years ago. Now it's mainstream. Now we just had that recent ASA publication, Childhood Sexualities. I don't know if everybody's seen that. Colin Wright did a really good write-up on it. That signals that they're going to try to go mainstream with child stuff. And so that's largely fed the HR departments. The media was already somewhat, what would you say, from a trait psychological standpoint, lefty. I mean, that's typically where the artists go. But, that's how institutions got captured, and this is where we are.
Yeah, the child sexualities article, I don't know if we have time to talk about it today, but it's just absolutely crazy. I mean, there's also that video recently, Take the Dog Pill, about sex with animals. So, I mean, once you've eliminated, there's an instinct on the left to kind of rescue the helpless and the oppressed. And once you've eliminated blacks and Irishmen and women and almost everybody else, the only oppressed people left are pedophiles and that sort of thing. Right. So you run into some issues. We
should bring Colin back on. We should have Colin Wright back on.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, this is definitely not my area of expertise, but I will say that there's obviously extreme things, and they should be tackled. Most people, like, I don't feel like it's right to characterize that as being a thing of the left. For example, with, do people say PDFs? It's just, I mean, everyone I've ever encountered, wants to protect children, and thinks some of these things are completely absurd. So they are, it's these like very radical small groups. I think what is really the problem is that there's these like bizarre radical ideas floating around, but people are afraid to push back. So I think most people recognize them as such, but there is this fear because the people who come up with these things or push these things are really aggressive. And there is this like fear of pushing back on a lot of these things. And it's not because people believe them, it's because, or in them, but because people are just too afraid of the people who are pushing them because they are so aggressive. And
Yes, but
because
which
then,
people are pushing them?
I mean, those particular things, they are happening on the radical left. Yeah, so
And you estimate
absolutely.
that's about what, 3 to 5%, right? Like it's a small.
Yeah,
Much less.
probably. Yeah, maybe less because
If you're
it
talking
doesn't feel like,
specifically that stuff, not LGBT, but if
yeah.
you're talking specifically either pedophilia or trans or
Oh,
the
I think that's very, very
Very,
small
yeah.
amount of
yes,
people,
Wait, are
much
we
right? I
less.
mean,
including trans in like kids being
That's still much
vaccinated?
less. That's still much
yeah.
less than 3
The
to 5%.
percentage of leftists who honestly support that has to be at least 25% of the 20% of the country.
Oh yeah, the people who
But
support it,
but
yes, I
they're
know
not
you're
That's what I
right.
was
but they're
gonna
not
say.
the drivers. And
Right.
I think the drivers, Will, I think this gets back to the toaster fucker problem, right? Like this is the idea that social media has allowed for a group of people that normally individually we would run out of town every town they come to. They've now found each other. The psychopaths have found each other, and
And they have a voice now,
right, and
outsized,
I
loud, larger than it really is.
And
cert-
that's on
Psychopaths
every
always had a voice.
topic.
They were at the top of
right.
every government, but the more useless mental illnesses.
That's really on every topic because, in the past, like you said, like I'll just use the flat earth, for example, so it's neutral.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, in the past, like, if I believed that the earth was flat, maybe I'd go talk to one other guy and they're like, Catherine, that's not right. And maybe I'll find another person out there who believes the same, but it would be much harder to form a group. Now on social media, instead of the sunshine being the best disinfectant sort of thing, no, it's like easier to find other people believe the things you do. But what happens is because you're finding this community, which is really a big part of that, that it's community, it's easier for you to become even more extreme in whatever the beliefs that you have are, because now you're in this group, it's egging you on, they all agree with you, and you're part of them. So like leaving, changing your mind becomes far more difficult. The reason people are so tribal in the first place, right? Like politically tribal, for example, right? Is because their community is that. So changing your mind or having a different opinion is really, really difficult within a tribe. And if you're also practicing these like more extreme beliefs, then again, you found a tribe that you really, really identify with, and it's much harder to change your mind. You see people bringing up, like, even within, sometimes I will listen in on spaces of people who are on X, people who are a bit extreme in different views, like, supremacists and all sorts of people like that, or even I have listened to Flat Earth for like spaces as well. If somebody brings in a challenge, they immediately kind of get pedaled, put down. And so they stop and they kind of recoil and they fit within the narrative again. And I think that's something that's really been amplified by social media for sure.
Yeah. So, first of all, I've done a lot of talking. Any questions from anybody? Charles Love.
I have a question. Because I think going back to being nuanced, I think everyone here has been right. But obviously it depends on the extent and how you look at things. So when you were talking about the Kimmel and the FCC thing, I agree. So I'm in the middle. I agree with those who say that it's problematic, it's not government's role, and they probably put their thumb on the scale that all is true. I believe so, but I also agree with Christy. And I don't even think I had a problem with what Jimmy said. I disagree with it, but I don't care. I don't listen to him. Um, and I think
Nobody
he has
did.
right to say it. But I also think that Christy made an important point, and because you responded to the FCC portion, we didn't really talk about that. And we remember, if you remember in that time frame when Trump won the first time, everything was about resist, right? There was a resistance. The Wall Street, I mean, the Washington Post changed their tagline to "Democracy dies in darkness." It's like everything was about being against them. You sue them, you get close to them, you get in your face, you shout them out, all this kind of stuff. So I find it hard to believe that Disney did not feel that they were in a place where they could push back if they wanted to. I think that, you know, It may, there's a lot of things we don't know. It'd be FCC precedent. It could be all of the above. It could be that. It could be, as Will said, the ratings. We didn't really want them around anyway. It's an excuse. Pressure on one side, then they brought them back because they got too much pressure on the other side. And all those things may be the case. But my question is, it all kind of culminates in your reply to, and you made a good point, which was also true, that whenever the extremes get a lot of voice, they act, and you use a neutral, what you call the flat earthers, as a neutral. But while I agree that that is true, it is not equal and even in, so the crazies or the extremists might be equal, and their outsized voice and influence is equal, but their influence from a standpoint of what the culture, the government, and everything all comes together is able to do is not the same. So I guess what I'm saying, do you agree with that? So I give an example. You got the flat earth, you got the white supremacists, you got the anti-vaxxers, there was a period of that, and you got the LGBTQ push. All of them have a voice. All of them have a belief that they're pushing. And we can throw in the extremists on the environment. The ones, at least I see it, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ones that seems to have the most outside impact that leads into legislation, policy, education, curriculum, and things of that nature, are the issues that are on the left. So I think it again goes back to, everyone's got their crazies, but some crazies are more powerful than others. So
Yeah.
I mean, because you obviously seem very middle of the road journalist type, honest and fair to both sides. Do you think that while the white supremacists have a louder voice because of social media, but no one is really in office trying to pass the white supremacist
Yeah,
legislation
they're not
like they
appearing
are?
on
Yeah, yeah.
MSNBC, right?
Yeah, I no, I know. I think that's very valid. I think they don't have the power or the tools, whereas like more left-leaning ideology or ideas
Right.
are definitely going to have more of that, and a lot of people believe in it. And again, I think that being able to, there's a lot of like people want to be nice and want to be good and don't want to be wrong, and it's like I think people are much more fearful of being accused, if it's an idea that maybe doesn't make logical sense or like statistical sense, but
It
it's
sounds
like
good.
might get you, it sounds good or might get you called a racist or whatever if you don't believe in it or invoke some sort of a very emotional response. People are going to be scared to push back on it, or they'll even embrace it like, this is great. Let's like, I started noticing that with quotas, for example, in the film industry. That was probably one of the first things, and I use that as an example because, it's easier for me because it was a quota for women, and it also because there was a funding agency that had announced that they're going to do 50-50, right? What I had happened to know at the time was that the amount of women that apply for funding was 30% and 70% was men. And so I'm like, well, let's consider that they're both equal and can create equally good projects. But if you have more submissions that are coming from men, but you're trying to equalize it, well, mathematically, you're going to greenlight more not as good projects by women, instead of focusing on like, okay, why aren't as many women applying for funding, which I think there could certainly tackle that. And so I was seeing things like that, but even then, people would kind of cheer for it and not really even think it through.
Hmm.
And then I have the conversations and make the argument that I did. No one ever like really pushed back on what I was saying because I think it makes sense. And but there was this like wholehearted embrace, and I think that's kind of what happens. I think it's that fear factor and then wanting to be with the thing that's
Right.
cool and helping people,
Hmm.
and I want to, like, I am a very people, I want people to like me. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Like I have all that within me that makes it sometimes really difficult for me to speak on some of these things because I'll hang out with someone and I really like them and I think they're lovely people and I have all this empathy. I understand where they're coming from and why they're feeling the way they are. And yet there's something maybe a little bit unsettling in the ideas that they're pushing. Like I don't quite agree with it, or I know the facts a bit more, so I know that this idea can't work.
Right.
And it's hard in that environment.
Well, let me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I get you too, but definitely Brooks and Christy to comment on that because I think the reason I think is so important because especially since Charlie Kirk and since Kimmel, all we're getting is either ignore the people who discount it. So many people are focusing on but the both sides, but they both do it. Yes, both do it. But I just don't believe it's equal both in the volume or the strength on both sides. So Brooks, Christy, what do you think about? Am I like?
Let Brooks go.
Okay, Brooks, go.
You juke me.
I didn't see you say anything. Then I saw the green light. Go.
So from the intel side, my intel history, the left saying currently, hey, we need to turn down the temperature after Kirk's assassination. This reminds me of the PLO after they've fired all their rockets, right? And now it's time to rearm. Like we need to call for peace.
You're talking about the guy who won the Nobel Prize for saying, I'm not going to kill anymore.
Yeah, Yasser Arafat. Right. Yeah,
he got an award for not saying he's not going to kill any more people. That's so awesome.
That's what it's reminiscent to me of. Because, you could have been turning down the temperature when you were calling all of us Nazis and punch a Nazi and speech is violence. And if speech is violence, then obviously you return violence with violence. And therefore you've set the logical stage for this outcome. So yeah, I view that as a tactic. I do not view it as, what would you say, sincere? I don't think the people saying that have a sincere. I don't believe that they have.
But I think some wacky independents are buying into it. I see people as someone in the middle. Right. I agree
you sway the middle. Both. Right. This is how you sway the middle. You sway the.
Someone on the middle looking at Twitter or Facebook, you probably are thinking like all these people are assholes. Like when Jane is at home just like doing her own research or gardening or something, she looks at my social media, it's like, Jesus, you got a Nazi arguing with like a radical feminist with kill all men in her background. Like, where are these people? Do they exist in reality? I mean, so I think that's a very common, and for those, I think those are both fairly fringe movements, but you can easily look at that. Say I'm surrounded by
60% bots, right? Like there's so much bot involvement that is, that is moving some of the needle there and
people trying to get clicks.
Well, this is where I'm optimistic though, because in spite of all, I think we forget what social media was like in the pre-Elon X. Like they were all in lockstep. And so where I'm hopeful there is, even with so much institutional capture, particularly where their market forces are present, you don't have to take half. You just have to provide an alternative, and that polices the rest. They have to, because they have to compete. And so if everybody wants to go to X, then, that's, I think the saving grace is that, when Elon purchased X, it really kind of reproved the fact that all you need in a market is the alternative. This is Gutfeld, right? You got one guy and he's making 3 million viewers to Kimmel's 1.1. So yeah, alternative.
Well, he's getting half the country and Kimmel is splitting it with like everybody, right? So I do think that plays a pretty big role because it's so captured by like there isn't a place for.
But why are there 3 left and 1 right? Like this is the
because the institution is
TV with licenses.
Right. So you've got one alternative that's capturing.
Gutfeld's audience is also the audience for the new media that we're on. Right. I mean, so like there are a lot of funny people on there. I mean, if you go Theo Von, Matt Walsh, Joe Rogan, Matt Rife, I mean, like everybody that's doing this sort of pod content that's a bro who leans at least center right. I mean, that audience would be 20 times the audience for late night television. I'm sure there are differences in terms of who the people are, Yeah, I mean, you're not going to sell the products you see on late night TV, Cadillacs or something, to 18-year-old men sitting in a barracks. But like, it's still, those people exist and they're going to grow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would definitely push back on that gut filled as getting half of the country. I mean, that's hugely optimistic. I mean, I'm as far right as you can get, and I don't like gut filled
I
No,
think
I don't.
what
or
I
she-
don't
nor
think.
watch it.
I think what Catherine is saying, and
Yeah, I
Catherine,
don't
if
think
you
that's what
prefer-
she said.
Yeah.
she's saying that there was one outlet, Gutfeld, for half the country, and there's 3 outlets.
And really, it's
No,
the
I got
opposite. It's like
that.
he's
You
only
like
getting 3
dick
million,
jokes on
and he's
late
got
night.
all those people to
Gutfeld
pick
is your
from.
conservative alternative.
I
Right.
think it's more likely that people aren't watching, young people aren't turning on the TV, fixing their antenna
Yeah,
to
I'm a
check
young
for
person and I
regular
don't turn on
TV.
TV
People are
as everyone likes.
tuning in more to, social media or network or, I think that is more likely. I think,
That's true. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I want to tell the guests, you can say what you're going to say. I want to also let you know, during the time you wrote your book, I just thought about it because we posted it recently. We had it because you talk about government interference. I agree with you with the FCC, but they were openly bragging about, blocking people and removing content. You got YouTube mentioning that they're doing it. You got Facebook admitting that
And
they're
I
doing
did
it.
talk about that in the book.
Yeah, we had
This
an
is
episode. We had an episode about COVID vaccine that got
Oh,
pulled. It's
yeah.
still to this day is not available on YouTube. And Will was pushing back against it. It was Peter McCullough. You still can't get it on
That,
YouTube.
that actually
yeah.
irritated Shanika, who was like, I just want to hear the doctor talk about medicine. None of you assholes are doctors. So there's a funny exchange going on the podcast. But that is definitely the case.
Yeah.
Well, Brooks was saying earlier that that there, Kimmel is now being, there's this whole conversation on the left about how free speech is under attack and all of these things, and he's this like martyr now. And it even like and that discourse really started with the protests on university campuses, really. I've been talking about this, when I think I've been pretty consistent, and I started talking about it when I was seeing it. I saw it happening to either people on the left who were disagreeing in some way straying away from the consensus, and I was seeing it. It was certainly also silencing conservative voices quite a bit, and we've seen that on university campuses in other areas. I had lots of messages from people who on the right who, left, who lost their careers, some on the left, both the left and the right. But I mean, it was happening on the left. And there was this abandonment of the principles of free speech and expression and all these things that I grew up with. Like when I went to my ultra liberal university, free speech was a fundamental left wing kind of thing. And then I was seeing it like not be, and then being quite embraced by the right, which made me ultimately get to know people on the right, because I was like, well, we had kind of a common understanding of wanting this free speech and discourse, and I was kind of stunned of what was happening on the left. And of course, the only times when they started speaking out about it, with the exception of specific individuals, but as like the whole apparatus now speaking out about it, it's because it was happening now to their central figures. So there is so much hypocrisy, and I definitely want to acknowledge that exists. And then, Christy like sort of brought up consequences culture, which I did like. When I hear that, I do, it is something that was very much used by the left as a phrase. I'm now hearing it on the right, but most significantly, like, it is a difficult thing to navigate, because it's easier for me to say, well, First Amendment, free speech, the government should not infringe, no matter what somebody says, even if I absolutely hate it, right? But when it comes to our private interactions, or whether I'm going to hire somebody or not, like, it's hard to have a consistent principle about that, because what I feel comfortable with is different than what somebody else feels comfortable with. And I don't feel like I can tell somebody how to respond to it. So we could be both watching the Kimmel show, and I might be like, well, I don't think it's so bad, but Christy thinks it is. And that's fair and valid. And but as a society, how do we navigate that? Like, because I was very upset about some of the cancellations because I did feel that they were unfair, that people were in good faith trying to have conversations about things. But somebody else looks at the same context and goes, "Well, that's terrible. That person is causing great harm." Like, how do you navigate that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because I don't know in some ways.
Well, isn't it the Peterson, you can't think without risking offending someone.
Yeah, but if you, which I very much agree with that, right? And I've sort of made a defense of why I think it's important to sometimes say the wrong thing. But, I guess I make a big distinction between like somebody saying the wrong thing because they're just thinking out loud and somebody, being an asshole, right?
Gratuitously.
Or
Yeah.
yeah. Which, there are people who are saying false things, for example, and that spreads so much on social media. There are people who, would I hire, like, I've thought about this, right? Like, some people would be like, well, no matter what this person says offline, as long as they're not, they don't bring it to work, that shouldn't be a factor. But then I'm like, well, if somebody, for example, if somebody is advocating for killing political opponents, I probably wouldn't want to hire that person, right? Because I just don't want to pay that person. I don't want to
Yeah.
be around them, even if they
Catherine,
don't say it at work.
you can't be an anti-racist and not talk about it all day at work. Like that's part of the doctrine.
That's true.
Yeah,
Right.
I think one of the big issues here also is when you say being an asshole or like grossly unacceptable, some of the terms we've all been using on the panel, the problem with that is that varies really widely across people.
Yes.
So, I mean, the thing that I've probably gotten criticized most for online was pointing out that crime rates and tested IQ scores vary between groups. I mean, that's not really even contested, but like last year on the PISA test, blacks caught Hispanics, Asians smoke everybody, whites are ahead of blacks and Hispanics. And people will react to that with absolute hysteria, like, what are you, a racist? And the response is, well, no, I'm interested in the test scores. Like they're all pretty good by global standards. But I don't think you should be able to fire someone for saying that. And I guess my one take on this, to the extent anybody cares, would be we do need an objective standard. So you can't fire James Damore for saying women are more emotionally intelligent than men, but men are better at math, because that's almost certainly true. That was the problem with cancel culture that I think on when this started on the left, that people are getting canceled for saying things like George Floyd was a criminal. And the question is now, is it okay to cancel someone for saying like, I'm glad he's dead about a popular media host? I mean, I think the standard of like mocking murder is actually pretty reasonable, but everyone has to agree on the standard, or it's just meaningless. It's just totally partisan.
And we
But
don't
but
have that agreement. Like James
right,
Damore,
we don't.
yeah, James Damore was actually one of the people I featured in my book as well, right? And like I didn't personally take an issue with what he had said, but somebody else, obviously a lot of people did.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
think that just a final follow up on that, and then I actually, as we're kind of trading off questions, I have one question for Christy and Brooks as well. But like, I think the thing with James Damore is that what he said wasn't really contested. Like, if you said that women are better verbally and
We
men are
just
better,
don't like it.
what's up?
We just don't like it.
Yeah,
Well,
we don't. We're all
well,
equal
I
in
mean,
every way. But
if
like,
the
that'd
more
be like me saying only women can give birth. You know, the 90% of the best soldiers are men. All rapists are men.
Well, I
I mean, these
think
are
one of the
contested.
standards makes sense is like, okay, is this a true thing? Is this factually
Ooh,
correct?
ooh, I don't know. Nope. So wait, Will just gave you
Okay.
one.
well,
Only women can have babies.
who should decide what is like who should decide? That's
Right. Who
that's the
decides?
rub,
Right. Right.
right? And because
Well,
the second we set a standard, the person that is going to enforce that is the exact last person you want enforcing that. Right? Like that's the rub.
Or the
no, and
eight.
So
I'm
there's
not
no
saying
standard.
no, and I'm thinking like if you said, these are the statistical scores of these test results, right? That's not something you can dispute. That's recorded. That's, unless there's some
Sure, they'll
problem with
say
the
the test are
methodology.
racist. Where have you been? Sure, you
Oh,
can dispute that. The test are
okay.
racist,
The
set up by
tester.
a white supremacist patriarchal society in deliberately to hurt the black and brown people and people of color, and obviously their trans and LGBT counterparts.
Yeah, I mean,
Charles,
I
I'm going
guess
to
you
do the
could
work.
you could say the
It's
tests are
skewed, and it's
racist.
only like they
But
was
the test did happen. Like, okay,
right.
but if I'm being precise and I say
Wait, did
this
you just agree
particular
with
test,
him? Did you just go down that rabbit hole and agree
We're
with
not
him?
agreeing that it's true.
I
We're
think you
no,
agreeing
might
no,
that
agree
that's
more
an
than any of us
argument
do,
people
but I
would
don't know
make.
about that.
yeah. So I agreed with the argument that they would
Okay.
make. Don't worry, I'm not that far gone. Um, no, he's right that people would make could make that kind of argument. But this is like the relativeness of everything is just. I don't know how to like if you're
You
gonna
don't
make
know.
that kind of argument, I don't know. All I can say is like, well, on such and such date, this many stars appeared, and then somebody is of course gonna say, well, but you used the wrong telescope to look observe it. Like
If
at
it
a
weren't for
certain
the white
point,
man's air pollution, there'd be many more.
yeah. So this is like maybe it's like sometimes we think that certain things are solvable, but like sometimes they're not. And then as a society, we kind of navigate the best we can. So
Right.
I try to talk. I think people should have more bandwidth to consider other ideas and give grace to people and especially if they are coming in good faith and kind of look at the person. If I see Joe Blow say something online and I don't know him and it sounds kind of like I'm probably going to have less grace than when I hear a friend of mine who I know to be a good decent person say something. Like with my close friends, there's never really an issue because we know where everybody's coming from, so we can really freely talk about everything. But with some people, there's more of a tension because we don't have that assumption of good faith, and with people we don't know, we do have a tendency to sort of assume the worst or give them less grace. It's hard because I talk to all sorts of people. My views are quite different probably to a lot of people on this panel, but um you know I think it's important to have these conversations, but some people would say like even having that conversation is like, oh, I'm encouraging this like whatever white
Right.
supremacy.
Right. Don't encourage the white supremacy. Will, you
Yeah.
said you had a question for Brooks and
Yeah,
Chrissy. I
yeah,
have a
for
question for
Ian
you too,
Brooks.
but you go first.
I'm sorry.
I have a question for you too, but you go first.
Okay, well let's do these questions in order, and then we're probably gonna wrap up the panel with our words of brilliance. But for Chrissy and Brooks, both of you guys have been very active in right-wing politics. I guess I had a quick question for you, which is, do you really think in the 45% or so of society that the right controls that there is less censorship? And I'm thinking about people that I've met who lean pretty far right, but are sort of atypical, like Ella, maybe on some different issues. Like if someone worked for Turning Point USA and they had a copy of The Ethical Slut on their desk, and they kept saying that we should disband anything that looked like a centralized government, like would they be able to stick around, or what do you guys think, Christy? I guess.
I mean, I think we're all tribal, right? Especially, the further right, like Turning Point, or, the further left you get, we're all tribal and we all have a standard, right? That's like saying, could somebody, work for Turning Point and be an atheist?
Well,
Probably
that's
not.
like, could you work for Turning Point, be an atheist or a Hindu?
No.
You don't think?
What makes you far right, Christy? I'm curious.
Girl,
you said
you're gonna have to call me on that one. That's a whole rabbit. I mean,
You should have heard what she said last episode.
Whoa.
I'm MAGA,
right.
so I'm MAGA, America first. So why is
Well,
that
let's-
surprising?
that Charles and I were
Wait,
sociopathic killers.
because she said, "Why is that a problem?"
Is that surprising?
Oh, she
That
said,
you're-
I thought
that-
you said it's a problem. Oh, that's good stuff.
No, I said is that surprising?
Oh, okay. Whew.
Is it surprising? It's not surprising necessarily, but I don't think that like everybody in MAGA identifies as being far right. I think a lot of people
Sure.
would say they're center right or they're right.
Former
Far
Democrat.
right is not a label that's like a lot of people will use on themselves unless they're
Self-described, yeah.
No one
extreme,
in
which
MAGA
don't-
describes himself as center right. I guarantee you that. That's like saying you're that's like saying you're a moderate.
A rhino.
On this panel, I say I'm far right because all of these guys say they're right,
For all these
and I'm
leftist
to the
losers.
right of them.
Yeah,
Okay,
she is.
to the right of them.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
a
wow.
reasonable assessment. Yes.
That's interesting. Well, it depends on the issue. I mean, Christy still believes in prisons as the solution to the crime problem. But Brooks Crenshaw, what do you think in right-wing politics? Is there more tolerance than there is in left-wing politics? More of a range of libertarians or female candidates, or is it the same thing?
I think there is in the source code an injunction to do what we're talking about here, which is, to allow free speech. But I believe that the population is mixed of, opportunists that once they seize enough power will do the exact same thing. It'll be for different issues. It'll be for porn or for,
Oh yeah, that's a good example.
It'll be a return to the album, as if they have albums anymore the way that they used to, but like the album cover warnings and the Tipper Gore type stuff and the devil music and all of that, which I lived through. And so I know enough from that experience to know it's there, and I would resist that as well. I mean, I wept over Charlie Kirk, and Destiny had a terrible thing to say the next day, but I believe he has the right to say it. I think it's detestable. I hate what he said. I really despise him. But that's the standard. And I think that is the right is coming out of, I believe, from a trend of its, over the last 60 years post-war, the right was less free speech in the founding principles, largely due to the Cold War defense mindedness with regard to the commies and the flag burning and all of that. And I think we have worked that out of our system largely as a result of having it done to us. And I hope that leads to a renaissance of more founder-based, philosophy and how we approach these issues.
That was really well said. I will say that some guys on the right that we're pretty buddy with, like Matt Walsh, no hate to him, but would probably ban porn and women's erotica like tomorrow.
Yeah, Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh are the guys that I watch, and I go, I'm gonna have to keep my eye on those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I love both those guys as men, but I don't want to live in some theocratic Catholic dictatorship necessarily. Right. And I think that there's that strong tendency on aspects of the right. And it's sometimes said as a joke, like I was raised as a Catholic and I'm functional in church. And so I've had buddies say, like, we're fishing or something, like, hey, we go back to church when we take power. It's just the idea that it would be socially normative for a gentleman or whatever to be religious. Your wife goes to church with you. You go every Sunday.
I was having drinks with a guy who works for a well-known right-wing university, which shall remain unnamed. And we were having cigars and drinking. And like, he was hard on, like, once we take power, we need to make this a Christian nation by law. And I'm like, where do you get this? Like, render unto Caesar, right? Like, there's a distinction there. That's the whole point of the book, is that it sets distinctions. And that's one of the key distinctions is, this is a personal wrestling match internally. This is societal, and Caesar's realm is societal and collective. And his take was that the book of Revelation basically, gives us an injunction to go conquer the world for Christ. So like that's out there, and I oppose that too. And I think Lindsay's done a lot of good work in trying to define where the line is, because like that's something we need to do. Like where the middle of the right can coalesce and understand what's out of bounds this way, what's out of bounds that way. Everybody gets to say what they want to say, but like we're not going this way.
I will say one thing that I do appreciate from what I see on the right is that, because I have had conversations and been around people who, absolutely like will espouse, even people who are very, very intellectual, very smart, and they'll very much espouse the white Christian country thing.
Right.
Or theology and all of that, but also just some radical ideas or civil war, as like that's, of course that's going to happen, and those kinds of things. And then I see a lot of within the right, just a lot of conversations and pushback, and I think that's very healthy. Sometimes it's aggressive, sometimes it's polite and civil, but it's quite healthy in the way it happens, even in the conversations that I've found myself sometimes surrounded by like complete right wingers, and I'm clearly not, and but I had really good conversations where I didn't feel like attacked or scared to say what I mean. And I think that's really healthy because you do have like these crazy fringes, but those crazy fringes don't define everybody else. What's really going to define is like, the leadership. It's going to, whatever battles are currently happening, which is what I'm kind of seeing is like there's such a battle within the right to figure out what is it, because you are this tent, as people have been using, of a lot of different
So
ideas.
do you make far right synonymous with fringe? Is that why you asked me?
Yeah, because I
Okay,
think
yeah, no, it's not.
okay. The reason that because far right is often has been used as a certain kind of term. So I found that like why most people that I've encountered on the right will not call themselves far right because they're not like
Well, it's like
extremists.
the term nerd or even Christian back in the first century. These were derogatory terms that then later became self-ascribed. Christie's just owned it, I think.
Mhm.
I think an actual hard right
Mm.
nutcase would say, I'm a member of the dissident right, alt right, new right,
Yeah.
interested.
I've
That
heard
would be
hard right. Yeah,
Yeah,
hard right.
that would
Like
be
people
like the
who
least hard right of them. Like anyone with a frog or toad, like they would not call themselves something mainstream like a non-rhino Republican. But Charles Love, you said you had the final question of the day for either the guest or one of us.
Well, I don't know. It'll be quick because it's tied into what you all just said. It sounds like you gave me a little clarity that there is some policing and there's some negotiation and there is some debate on the right. And she mentioned in the book that a lot of the things she found it started with people being canceled on the left. And we kind of agreed that people have the same behavior on both sides. But do you all think that one of the distinctions can be that the left is more likely to cancel their own? So
Currently.
that's what I want to know. If you think that, so I know that Brooks, but
That's
your
interesting.
question led Brooks and Chrissy to talk about some things that are happening all right, but it didn't sound like the people were being flat out canceled. Aside from the atheists not being able to work at TP, I don't know about that. So do you think
Well,
that the
I mean,
left is far
Charlie
more
Kirk
likely
had
to?
Charlie Kirk had gay staffers,
That's what I said.
which
I
at
said I don't
turning
know if I
point.
agree with that, but Christy knows
Yeah.
that better than I do, so I didn't want to say that. Um, but
There are
yeah,
a
do you
lot of
think that the cancellation is less likely on the right, canceling their own, like someone on the right canceling the right?
I've observed that, like I was just thinking about that recently, and it does seem to me to be the case. Like I do think the left goes much harder after other people on the left if they transgress. The right will have battles, and there is a level of it that I'm seeing, but it doesn't seem to be to the same extent, at least not currently.
Uh,
But I don't know how you
Brooks, you
guys
were saying
feel.
something.
Yeah, I've got a commentary on that. I think one of the reasons that there's a comedian, I forget what his name is, but he's got a great bit where he's like, I'm a liberal, but like conservatives, when they see other conservatives and they say, I'm a conservative, they say, come on over, that's great. And when I see a bunch of liberals and I say, I'm a liberal, they say, we'll see, right? And there's kind of this purity test, and it's
Right.
largely, I believe, because the right already has their religion and then they have their
Ouch.
politics, right? The left, their politics largely is their religious impulse. And so they participate in religious pathologies of banning the heretic and, burning the witch. And these are human problems. Like this is what humans do. And we have religious impulses. And when those religious impulses are immature, which neo-Marxism is a fairly new religion, you get these types of pathological behaviors. And I think that that's a human problem.
really.
It might really quick. It might be a regional thing because I'm in Arizona, so it's about as hard wing as you can get out here. So when I first came here,
It's the
people were
heat.
like, you're not a conservative and you have to prove you're conservative. And immediately I'm like, screw you. I'm an adult. I'm not proving nothing. You know what I mean? I'm me. I'm here. This is what it is. And through time, they got to see that, yeah, she's really a conservative, but they are not accepting into the
May not
tribe
be
out here.
accepted, but they didn't cancel you.
They don't let you in.
But they let you live. They don't
And a
take your
good note to bring,
livelihood.
Ron.
I do
And
think that the right is less likely to like they'll go quite viciously against somebody they don't like on the left, but I haven't seen that same like passion
Oh,
towards
ask
going.
James Lindsay.
Lindsay's getting it.
I know he is in counter. So
There's
there are
one thing I would
exceptions. There are
say
exceptions for sure.
Well, actually, I think that the argument, the right seems to be, this is like Curtis Yarvin, right? Like no enemies to the right. Like almost everyone who's reasonably intellectual on the right has read some of that stuff. And I think that that explains a lot of what Christy's talking about. Like what they're saying about James Lindsay is that he's not on the right anymore. And so there are all these tests that people give to him. Like, how do you feel about gay people? If you
And
read
they
his,
say he hates Christians.
Right.
yeah, that's the like James actually. I think
not
he's been
true.
thinking a little bit about atheism. He goes to churches all the time. I don't think he hates Christians at all. But it's just the target. Like, oh yeah, you still don't quite believe in God, do you, boy? So I mean, that's I think how we'd handle that on the right. But all right, at 10:15, unless there are any passionate last statements, we're gonna wrap up with our words of wisdom. Always ended by our guest, invariably a wise person. As the least wise member of the panel, I will say, I think, yeah, the cancellation, the urge to dislike members of the out group is pretty universal for humans. I mean, this isn't going to be long. Like, I still don't like the color red. Well, actually, the color blue is even worse. That rival high school was red and blue. It was an unpopular color for various reasons in my old neighborhood. Like, when you see certain matches, the Green Bay Packers yellow and green is even worse. You viscerally dislike them. Many people carry that into adult life about much more serious things like politics and the out tribe. I think you have to control that, but I don't really know how. With that, who wants to pop up next?
Okay.
Brooks Crenshaw. Yeah, okay.
So yeah, tribalism leads to war, trade leads to peace, right? Like that this is one of the maxims. And I think a lot of the tribal, I mean, having been in a lot of war zones where the whole country is so backwards because it's so tribal, and getting to see it in that light, I now see it everywhere. It's Miyamoto Musashi. When you know the way broadly, you see it in all things. And the tribal aspect, I think, is the problem, and trade is the answer. And every one of these conversations is a micro experiment. We're experimenting. Sometimes I'm going to get things wrong, but I'm going to learn from that wrong, and I'm going to sharpen my steel with other steel. So that's, I think, the most important aspect of speech is that we should defend the speech that we hate and kill and die for it.
Boom. Charles Love, do you agree with that? Disagree with that? What else do you have to say?
I agree with that. I think more words of wisdom from Brooks is always good. I would just say that it was smart earlier when I think you and was it Brooks were talking about how we have to agree on something. If we're going to say we need to come up with some norms and agree with them. And Brooks said, well, yeah, well, who's going to make those and who's going to enforce them? I think it's a good place to go, but I don't think we can get there. So the best solution is for people to grow a spine and not allow themselves to be canceled.
Excellent. There's actually a whole debate about like would unions help with that Charles, I think we've had that other people have had on this panel. But Christy Kelly, as a member of the far right to the left for our screen today, what do you think as we close off?
So, two quick things. One thing is, I don't go around in my normal life saying, hey, I'm right wing, right? But in certain circles, especially on this show, these guys will say stuff that will not allow me to be around my right wing, my MAGA friends. So I want to distinguish that I am to the right.
She's going to get kicked out of the country club, guys.
I will get kicked out of Arizona politics messing around on this show if I do not distinguish. I'm to the right of these guys, and I'm happily there. Now, the other thing I want to say is we didn't talk. To me, this is a big boomerang, what we're watching, right? Because for the longest time, they did so much stuff to Trump and the right wing. I mean, they called him a fascist, a racist. They tried to jail him. They tried to kill him. And so now, of course, he has a list. Of course, he had a hit list. We saw today with Comey.
James Comey's on it?
I mean, I used to think I was the biggest, like, free speech, biggest libertarian leaning, conservative.
You want revenge, don't you, Christy?
I'm here for it. I'm sorry.
That's 2 in a row. She is on a streak. Oh,
And sure, well, Christy's hit some balls today. And for our guest, Katherine Brodsky, obviously the guest always takes it home. What do you think? What's your final word about the book? Other than buy it? What do you think?
Well, principles have to be consistent, or they're not principles. And I think that we are all imperfect people trying to figure things out. Some things are impossible to figure out. And I think the biggest thing that I want people to lead with is curiosity. And I think if people lead with curiosity, we'll see a lot less issues that we currently do, because you're going to look at the world differently. And having individual one-on-one conversations, I've realized, is really the way forward. Nobody's going to like change their minds like from a tweet, but having a conversation with someone they respect and feel has their best interests in mind, that's really like the pathway to actually opening people's minds, at least to consider ideas. And I think silence is violence. No, I think it's important when you know that what you're hearing is not right, and it's important to you. It's important to speak up and find the courage. And everybody's going to have a different thing, but especially when what you're seeing isn't right, and people you care about maybe are being hurt. So speaking up is crucial, and if we don't speak up, it's the loud voices that we maybe don't particularly appreciate that are going to be in control of our destiny, and I don't think that's what any of us want, except for those people. So cancel them.
Excellent closing line. All right. Thank you to Katherine Brodsky for coming on Cut the Bull, as Will Reilly, along with Charles Love, Christy Kelly, Brooks Crenshaw. We are out for the night.
I got a country to say. Patriot J, I'm saving the day. Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who lame. No, you can't fuck with me. I got a country to say. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and the home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to say, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.